Hook 1. Have you ever faced a moment where your worth was judged by the color of your skin? This money? Is it really yours? She asked, eyes pinned to his skin, as if its shade alone disqualified him from owning that many crisp $100 bills. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried sharp, pointed, and accusatory, slicing through the polite hush of the bank. Heads turned, conversations halted. A dozen eyes now rested on the tall black man in the tailored gray suit, standing calmly at the counter with a black leather case at his feet. Marcus D. Hill held his posture with ease, though he felt the weight of those stares. Not the kind born of curiosity, but the kind that asked silently what someone like him was doing with that much money, as if wealth had a color. He didn't flinch. He'd faced worse. "I am Marcus Hill," he said, his tone calm but firm. "And I'm here to make a deposit to my business account." Karen Whitmore blinked. Her eyes dipped to the check on the counter. $50,000, signed, dated, endorsed. "And what kind of business exactly?" she asked, her voice syrupy with the aftertaste of disbelief. "Hill Foundation. We fund vocational programs, community mentorship, and small business development." Karen raised a skeptical brow. "That sounds charitable." "It is," Marcus replied. "We believe in giving people their shot." Karen's fingers hovered over her keyboard. "Well, I'll still need 2 forms of ID and something explaining the origin of these funds." Marcus slid over his driver's license. She squinted at it, holding it longer than necessary. Her eyes darted back to the check. "This signature, it looks like mine," Marcus offered, a small edge creeping into his voice. Karen ignored the comment. "We just have to be careful. Fraud's been rampant lately, especially in certain neighborhoods." Marcus inhaled slowly. "This check wasn't written from a neighborhood. It was written from my corporate account." A few feet away, a middle-aged couple whispered, eyes still on Marcus. Across the lobby, a man in a cowboy hat frowned, arms crossed. Stella, the younger teller to the left, glanced over. She leaned closer, squinting at the check. "That's the Hill Foundation logo. We had one just like it last Thursday, remember?" Karen stiffened. "You're not on this transaction, Stella." Marcus glanced at her. "Thank you." He turned back to Karen. "I'd like to speak to the branch manager." He's busy," she snapped. Marcus arched a brow. "Then I'll wait." Karen folded her arms. "There's a process to follow, sir." "Yes," Marcus said, his voice like velvet wrapped around steel. "But it seems the process only stiffens when my skin tone enters the room." A beat of silence. Karen said nothing. Marcus looked down, gathered his documents. He reached for the black case, ready to leave, ready to walk into another day of subtle battles and silent dignity. But then he stopped. Hook 2. What if one man's stand could change an entire system? Near the second counter, an elderly black woman in a faded cardigan stood with a check in hand and nervous eyes. Her voice trembled as she spoke to a different teller. "I just need a little to get my roof patched before the rain comes again. It's been dripping right above my bed." The teller shook his head. "Not with this credit score, ma'am." Marcus' fingers tightened around the handle of his case. He saw his mother. He saw her standing in a similar bank decades ago asking for a loan to keep their laundromat open. He saw the polite refusal. He saw her walk out, back straight, heart cracked. He saw her dreams dismissed not by numbers but by assumptions. If this moment moved you, let us know where in the world you're watching from in the comments. Hit like if you believe. Respect should never depend on skin color. And subscribe for more powerful stories that speak truth and heart, brought to you by BUP Stories. And suddenly he wasn't just Marcus Hill CEO. He was a son. He was a witness. He was the echo of every closed door. He turned back, placed the case down again with quiet intent. "On second thought," he said, his voice louder now, filled with purpose, "I'm not going anywhere." Karen blinked. "Excuse me. I'm waiting for the manager." And I want a formal explanation of your handling of this deposit. I also want this entire interaction documented. The bank lobby fell silent again. Even the printers paused as if unsure whether to continue. Stella looked up, surprised, but quietly approving. The elderly woman turned her head slowly, recognition in her tired eyes. A security guard shifted uncomfortably near the entrance. Marcus adjusted his sleeves, shoulders square. He wasn't just holding money anymore. He was holding the line. The bank lobby held its breath. Karen stared at Marcus like she was trying to will him out of existence. Her fingers hovered uncertainly above the keyboard, the forced authority in her posture beginning to crack. Around them, customers remained still. Some pretending to fidget with their phones, others watching openly, absorbing the quiet confrontation playing out like a slow-burning fuse. Marcus remained where he stood, calm, composed, but unmoving. I said, "I'll wait for the branch manager," he repeated, his voice carrying not aggression, but finality. Karen glanced toward the back hallway, clearly reconsidering. Then, as if to reassert her control, she forced a brittle smile. "Well, if you'd like to wait, you may take a seat. It could be a while." "I'll stand," Marcus replied. Stella shifted in her chair nearby. She leaned slightly toward Marcus, lowering her voice. "He should be out soon. I'll let him know you're here." He nodded, appreciating the quiet gesture. A few minutes passed, stretched thin by tension. The elderly woman Marcus had noticed earlier stepped carefully away from her teller station, shoulders hunched, clutching her checkbook and small purse. "Excuse me," she whispered as she walked past Marcus. "Thank you for saying what you said. They don't listen to folks like me. Not anymore." He met her eyes and saw her truth. Not just one woman's struggle, but a lifetime of being told to wait, to shrink, to be grateful for less. "You shouldn't have to say anything just to be treated like a person," Marcus replied gently. "That should come standard." She gave a frail nod and disappeared through the glass doors. The seconds ticked on. Then, finally, the door to the back office opened and out stepped a man in his early 50s, short, balding, tie slightly askew, Stephen Larkin, branch manager. He looked confused at first, then uneasy as his eyes caught the stillness in the room, the hushed murmurs, the unnatural posture of the space. Karen motioned him over, whispering something. He frowned, glanced at Marcus, then at the case still resting on the floor beside him. "Mr. Hill?" he asked. Marcus turned toward him. "Yes, I understand there's been a misunderstanding. Let's take this into my office." Karen started to speak, but Stephen cut her off with a slight raise of his hand. Marcus nodded once, picked up the case, and followed. The office was modest, fluorescent lights buzzing slightly overhead, a framed photo of the bank's founders on the wall. Stephen gestured toward a chair. "I want to begin by apologizing," he said, sitting across the desk. "It's clear this didn't go as smoothly as it should have." "That's an understatement," Marcus replied, voice still steady. "I walked in to make a deposit. I left with my identity questioned, my legitimacy challenged, and half the room staring like I was about to rob the place." Stephen cleared his throat. "Miss Whitmore was just following procedure." "No," Marcus interrupted, still calm but firm. "Miss Whitmore was profiling. You and I both know that what I experienced isn't about policy. It's about presumption. She looked at me and assumed something criminal was happening. Not based on my behavior, but my appearance." Stephen looked down, fingers steepled. "I can't speak for her intentions." "Then speak for your bank," Marcus said. "Because this isn't isolated. I've seen the data. I know the rejection rates at minority focus branches. I know which neighborhoods get special policies and which customers are marked for extra scrutiny." Stephen blinked. "You've looked into our practices." "I fund economic outreach," Marcus said. "I track disparities. It's my business to notice when institutions build invisible walls around opportunity." Stephen exhaled. "Look, Mr. Hill, I understand your frustration. Let me personally complete your deposit today, and I'll make sure Miss Whitmore receives additional training." No, Marcus said again. This isn't about one person needing training. It's about your institution needing accountability. Stephen opened his mouth, then shut it again. Marcus stood slowly. You have two choices. You can address this quietly. Make it disappear. Wait for the next customer to swallow their pride and walk away. He paused, then leaned slightly across the desk. Or, he continued, you can be part of fixing a broken system today publicly. Stephen hesitated. What exactly are you suggesting? Marcus picked up his phone. With a few swipes, he opened a screen and showed Stephen a short list of names. Local journalists, civil rights advocates, council members. I've got a press event scheduled tomorrow morning. We're launching a new initiative, Equal Access Banking. I was going to partner with another branch, but after today, I'm thinking Norcrest should be the face of change. Stephen's eyes widened slightly. Assuming, Marcus added, you're willing to acknowledge there's something here that needs to change. The silence that followed was heavy, but not awkward. It was the kind of pause that weighed options, futures, consequences. Then Stephen nodded slowly. I'll talk to the board. Marcus gave a single nod and extended the check. Let's finish the deposit. As Stephen took the check, the buzz of the bank outside resumed, but it felt different now, like a ripple had started, a small tremor in the foundation. And Marcus, he wasn't just here for a deposit anymore. He was investing in something deeper. Stephen Larkin personally walked Marcus out of the office, offering a tight handshake that looked more like a peace offering than an apology. The lobby had relaxed into its regular rhythm, but the energy had shifted. Karen avoided Marcus's gaze, hiding behind a monitor with newly exaggerated diligence. Stella gave Marcus a brief, almost imperceptible nod, respectful, not pitiful. Marcus left the building with the same case in hand, a little lighter now, but his shoulders held the same weight, not of cash, but of memory, of history. Outside, the sun warmed the sidewalk, but his mind wandered to a colder time. He was 12, sitting in the back of his mother's Dodge Caravan while she stood inside a credit union, dressed in her Sunday best, clutching a loan application with trembling hands. Marcus had watched her come back to the car, smile thin and hollow, pretending everything was fine. They just need more time to process it. Baby, she had said, though he'd seen the flicker in her eyes, the truth. That day she'd sold her wedding ring to patch the laundromat roof. Marcus had never forgotten. Now, as the door of Norcrest closed behind him, he wasn't just a man with means. He was a man with a memory and a mission. By the time he got to his SUV, his phone buzzed. It was Kyla Simmons, his communications director. Marcus, she said without pleasantries. I just saw the flagged report from the live security feed. You okay? They questioned the check, demanded multiple IDs, accused me of laundering money, all while staring like I didn't belong in my own country. Kyla cursed under her breath. Same old story. Yeah, Marcus said, but maybe it doesn't have to stay that way. There was silence on the other end. Then you want to go public with it? Marcus considered it. Not the confrontation. The pattern. Kyla exhaled. Then we need more than your word. We need evidence, patterns, data, documents. I have some of it. Remember that university project we funded on redlining and banking? Ask them to prioritize the Norcrest regions. Done, she said immediately. What's the angle? Human dignity and economic sabotage dressed as policy. Another pause. You're not going to let this go, are you? No, Marcus replied. Because they won't either. They hung up and Marcus sat in the car for a moment longer. A group of teenagers passed by laughing, backpacks swinging. One of them, a boy, maybe 17, skin dark like Marcus, wore a hoodie that read, "Still rising." Marcus smiled faintly. That boy would walk into a bank someday. And when he did, Marcus wanted the outcome to be different. He drove straight to the foundation headquarters on Auburn Avenue, a building steeped in historical echoes. Dr. King had marched down this street. Marcus had made sure the glass windows of his building reflected that legacy. Inside, his assistant, Rosa, handed him a folder. "Compiled every formal complaint we've ever received from clients about bank discrimination," she said. "There's a lot more than I thought." He opened the folder. Dozens of pages, names, dates, denials. "How many reference Norcrest?" he asked. "At least 10 in the last year," she said. "Most from their southern branches." Marcus nodded, jaw tight. Then something caught his eye, an email from a woman named Elise Brooker, a former Norcrest employee. She'd resigned 2 months ago, citing ethical conflicts. Her message was direct. "If you're looking into Norcrest's internal policies, I have something you need to see." He stood up. "Rosa, get Kyla back on the line and find a private meeting space." Within an hour, Elise was on a video call. Late 30s, sharp eyes, Midwestern accent. "They won't put it in writing," she said. But there was definitely a soft code. "What kind of code?" Marcus asked. She leaned forward. "Higher scrutiny for checks over $10,000 from zip codes that were predominantly Black or Latino. Extra ID verification, more internal reviews." The excuse was always fraud prevention, but the algorithm knew what it was targeting. Marcus leaned back, absorbing it. "You have proof?" Elise nodded. "Not the directive itself, but I kept screen captures, emails between supervisors, flagged memos. Enough for patterns." "And you're willing to testify?" "I've got nothing left to lose," she said. "And honestly, I'm tired of pretending that just doing your job is an excuse for injustice." Marcus's voice was quiet but resolute. "Then you're not alone." That night, Marcus sat in his study at home. Photos of his parents lined the bookshelf. His father in a mechanic's jumpsuit, his mother behind the cash register. Every wrinkle in their faces told stories of denial, quiet dignity, and tireless work. He sipped coffee and turned on the television. Another pundit discussing economic disparity in abstract terms using charts and bar graphs as if people's lives were just math. He turned it off, then opened his laptop. A new document blank. He typed the title first. Equal Access Banking Initiative. Restoring Trust Through Transparency and Reform. His fingers moved faster as the outline formed. He wasn't just building a case. He was building a movement. The war wasn't loud, but it had begun. And Marcus Hill was done being quiet. 3 days after the Norcrest incident, Marcus found himself standing behind the velvet rope of a private banking summit at the Fairmont in downtown Chicago. The annual National Banking Ethics Forum was invitation only. A polished gathering of board members, lobbyists, regulators, and executives, almost entirely white, mostly men, each with a name badge clipped to an expensive suit. Marcus had not been invited. He walked in anyway. Kyla trailed beside him, scrolling through her phone, whispering updates. "We've confirmed Elise Brooker's documents. Cross-referenced them with federal compliance logs. There's enough for a formal complaint and the press. 3 media outlets are circling. One wants an exclusive, but I'm holding until we release the report." "Good," Marcus murmured. "Let's make them come to us." Inside the conference hall, chandeliers cast soft light over round tables, white linens, polished silver. A man at the entrance, a junior coordinator, stepped toward Marcus, confusion on his face. "Excuse me, sir. This event is—" "I know," Marcus said, calmly producing his ID. "I'm Marcus Hill. I believe your ethics panel should hear what I have to say." The coordinator hesitated, glanced toward the main ballroom, then reluctantly nodded. "We weren't expecting you." "You weren't expecting the truth either," Kyla muttered under her breath as they walked in. At the podium, an older gentleman from the American Bankers Association was talking about digital transparency, using buzzwords like consumer trust and data hygiene. Marcus listened for a few minutes, then leaned toward Kyla. It's like hearing someone talk about cleaning windows while ignoring the termites in the walls. She smirked, ready to make a little noise. The moment came at the networking break. As conversations erupted around wine glasses and hors d'oeuvres, Marcus stepped onto the side stage unannounced. A few heads turned. Most didn't recognize him until he spoke. "My name is Marcus D. Hill," he said, clear and steady. "Founder of the Hill Foundation, investor in over 24 community banks, and most recent casualty of a quiet yet destructive banking practice. I believe many of you in this room are either ignoring or enabling." Now, the heads turned. A silence followed, then whispers. "I'm not here for sympathy," Marcus continued. "I'm here because I believe financial institutions are silently reinforcing inequality, dressing it up as protocol, wrapping it in language like risk mitigation or verification standards." He held up a folder. "This," he said, "is a report with documented internal communications from Norcrest Financial showing a systemic bias against clients from minority neighborhoods. Not one error, a pattern." A security officer stepped closer to the stage. Kyla intercepted him with a firm glare and a press badge. "We're not trespassing. We're testifying." Marcus didn't stop. "I've submitted this evidence to the CFPB, and by next week, it will be public record. But this isn't just about Norcrest. This is about an entire culture of exclusion carefully disguised as due diligence." Now, the room wasn't just silent. It was stunned. A man in a gray blazer stepped forward. "Sir, this isn't the place for it, then where is the place?" Marcus asked, eyes locked on him. "Because I've tried quiet meetings. I've tried backroom calls. I've tried giving time. And all I've seen is delay." The man said nothing. Marcus' tone softened slightly. "I'm not trying to tear anyone down. I'm trying to open a door that should have never been closed." He left the stage without fanfare. No applause, no outrage, just the uncomfortable weight of truth settling in. That night, the video clip hit social media. Kyla posted it with the caption, "What happens when the man you try to silence walks into your own conference with receipts?" Within hours, it had over 2 million views. The next morning, Marcus sat in a small cafe in Bronzeville, sipping coffee with his old friend Jeremiah Langston, a retired civil rights lawyer who had mentored him since his early nonprofit days. "I saw the speech," Jeremiah said, sliding a phone across the table. "You're shaking a hornet's nest, son." "Good," Marcus said. "They've been stinging us for decades." Jeremiah smiled faintly. "You're making enemies, powerful ones." "I've got enough friends," Marcus replied. "What I need now is allies." Jeremiah leaned back. "Just remember, some battles are won by staying loud, others by knowing when to whisper." Marcus nodded. "And I plan to do both." A few tables away, a middle-aged woman was watching them. She rose, approached hesitantly, holding a to-go cup. "Mr. Hill." Marcus turned. "Yes." She smiled. "I just wanted to say what you're doing. It matters. My brother lost his business after his bank froze his funds for investigation. He never got a real explanation. Just red tape. You're giving people like him a voice." Marcus reached out, shook her hand. He already had a voice. They just chose not to hear it. "I'm here to make sure they can't ignore it anymore." And as she walked away, Jeremiah watched him carefully. "All right, Marcus," he said quietly. "If this is the road you're taking, I'll walk a few miles with you." Marcus nodded. Because now the road wasn't his alone. And with every step, the silence of the past gave way to something louder. Justice on its way. The afternoon sun spilled across Auburn Avenue as Marcus walked alone down the block where his foundation headquarters stood. His pace was slow, not for lack of energy, but because every brick of the sidewalk carried a piece of history. This was the road his grandfather once swept before dawn. The street where his father fixed cars out of a rusted garage. The city hadn't always loved them, but they had always loved it back. Now Marcus walked it as a man both celebrated and targeted, applauded in public, challenged in boardrooms, and whispered about in banking circles. Back inside the Hill Foundation, Rosa met him at the elevator with her usual efficiency. 2 voicemails from CNN, 3 from local stations. Senator Garza's office also called. "They're asking if you'll testify at the financial oversight hearing next month." Marcus raised a brow. Already? You're gaining ground, Marcus, Rosa said. But the ground is shifting. He nodded, stepped into his office, and shut the door. He needed a moment. The room smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. His bookshelf was lined with biographies, Dubois, Baldwin, King, and a framed photo of his mother on opening day at her laundromat, still smiling despite the rain that soaked her dress. Her smile was always full of stubborn hope. Marcus sat at his desk, opened his laptop, and reviewed the internal data Kyla and the legal team had gathered. Hundreds of client stories, formal complaints, policy contradictions. But something was missing. He opened the folder labeled Case Files 1980s. It was his mother's loan application, photocopied and preserved, rejected 3 times. Not for lack of income, not for lack of business plan, just missing sufficient collateral. She'd kept the letters hand-marked with red ink. Marcus read them again now, each sentence burning brighter than the last. A soft knock on the door pulled him back. It was Stella, nervous, unsure. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "But I got your message. You said if I ever wanted to talk, I could come." Marcus stood, motioned for her to sit. "Of course, come in." She sat, eyes down, hands twisting in her lap. "I don't want to lose my job." "You won't. Not because of me." She nodded, took a breath. Karen. She wasn't just rude. She had a list. Marcus leaned forward. "A list?" Stella nodded again. "We were told to watch for what they called transactional red zones, mostly zip codes from black neighborhoods, some Latino. If someone from those areas brought a check over $5,000, we had to flag it." "Was that written down?" Marcus asked. "No, but it was repeated. In meetings, whispered. Everyone knew." He leaned back, jaw tightening. "And you have documentation?" Stella hesitated, then pulled a flash drive from her coat pocket. "I made copies of the internal emails. I didn't feel right erasing them." He took it gently. "You did the right thing. I just thought you should know," she whispered. "You weren't imagining it." Marcus stood, crossed to the window, looked out across the avenue. "I knew it," he said quietly. "But proof changes everything." That night, Marcus called a meeting with Kyla, Rosa, and Jeremiah. They gathered in the dimly lit conference room, paper cups of coffee steaming between them. Marcus placed Stella's flash drive in the center of the table. "This," he said, "is the keystone." Jeremiah plugged it into his laptop, brows furrowing as emails unfolded. Conversations between regional managers, memos about overdue reviews on minority-led accounts, language like risk clusters and compliance code escalation attached to zip codes. "This is gold," Kyla whispered. "And poison to them," Jeremiah nodded. "Enough to bring Norcrest to its knees." Rosa added, "We could file a class action, reach out to clients affected. You'd have every civil rights firm in the country behind you." Marcus stared at the screen. "No," he said finally. "Not yet." "Huh?" The room fell silent. "I don't want to win a lawsuit," Marcus continued. "I want to win a culture shift, a visible one. Lawsuits settle quietly. I want this shouted from rooftops. I want every young banker of color to walk into a boardroom knowing he belongs there. And I want every client to stop apologizing for asking what they've earned." Kyla leaned in. "So, what's the next move?" "We go public," he said. "But not through media, through people." He reached for his phone. "Set up a town hall," Marcus said. "Here at the church on Edgewood Avenue, open to everyone. We bring the data. We bring the testimonies. We bring faces." He looked around the table. "And we don't just expose the system. We ignite a movement." The doors of Mount Calvary Baptist Church opened at 5:30 p.m. sharp. By 6:15, every pew was filled. Foldable chairs lined the aisle. Standing room filled the vestibule. People came with folded papers, manila envelopes, notebooks clutched to their chests. Some wore suits. Others wore work boots and jackets still dusted with drywall. They came from across Atlanta: bank tellers, small business owners, retirees, single mothers. Some came angry, others came curious. All came because they had felt it. The quiet rejection that needed no name. Marcus stood behind the pulpit, jacket off, sleeves rolled, voice steady through the church's old sound system. This isn't a courtroom, and it's not a press conference. This is a room for truth. The crowd hushed. He held up a simple printed chart. This, he said, is the approval rate for small business loans in Norcrest's primary coverage zone broken down by zip code. White majority neighborhoods 76%. Black majority neighborhoods 23%. Same average credit score, same average income, different outcome. Murmurs rippled through the room. Now let's look at flagged deposits. He continued, switching slides. Cash over $5,000 deposited in black zip codes was flagged 61% of the time. In white zip codes, just 8%. A woman stood up from the second row. "I knew it," she shouted. "They held my husband's check for 7 business days. Told him it was irregular, even though it was his payroll bonus." Others began to speak. A man in a mechanic's uniform raised his hand. "They closed my account after I got a settlement check. Said they had to review its source. I had to cash it at a payday place just to pay rent." One by one, the stories poured out, told into microphones over shaky hands, some in tears. Kyla typed rapidly beside Marcus, documenting every word. Rosa stood with a clipboard at the back, taking names for those who wanted to file official complaints. An older man with a cane approached the front. His voice trembled more from age than emotion. "I served in Korea, bought my home through the GI Bill. But 3 years ago, Norcrest denied my refinance loan, told me the equity wasn't sufficient. My neighbor, white, same house plan got approved that same week." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. "I'm not bitter. I'm just tired of pretending I don't notice." A hush fell. Marcus stepped forward again. "What you're describing," he said, "is not coincidence. It's not random. It's institutional." He pulled out a large folder and held it up. "We now have internal documentation showing policy-level discrimination. We've collected over 180 stories like yours. We're partnering with civil rights organizations to launch what we're calling the Equal Access Banking Initiative." The room stirred again. "But we won't win this alone," he continued. "We need witnesses. We need testimonies. We need faces. Because the system doesn't fear statistics. It fears stories that can't be ignored." He looked around the packed church. "Will you be those stories?" A moment passed. Then applause erupted. Not polite clapping, but a thunderous, visceral sound that filled the stained glass air. People stood, shouted affirmations, raised fists, held hands. After the meeting, Marcus stepped outside into the cool night. Stella was waiting near the front steps. "They're going to come after you," she said quietly. "I know. Not just lawyers, PR firms, lobbyists. They'll try to twist it. Make it look like you're overreacting, like you're making trouble where there's none." Marcus nodded slowly. "Then we make sure there's no room for twisting. We keep everything open, transparent, documented. We let the people speak for themselves." She smiled faintly. "You've started something. I don't think they're ready for what's coming." Neither was he. Not entirely. But the fire was lit now. Later that night, Marcus sat at his desk staring at a whiteboard filled with names and arrows, banks, advocacy groups, media outlets, potential partners. One phrase was written in red at the top. "Truth only matters when it's louder than the lies." Jeremiah called him around midnight. "I saw the town hall." The old man said, "You turned a community meeting into a movement." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "I didn't turn it. They did. Maybe, but you gave it a name." Jeremiah's tone shifted. "They'll try to settle with you." Money, private apology, maybe even a board seat. I don't want their seat, Marcus replied. I want the table to be bigger, and I want everyone to be invited. There was a long silence. Then Jeremiah said softly, All right, son. Now, let's make sure they can't ignore your voice. Marcus looked out his window. The city lights shimmered, but in the shadows he could still see her, his mother, smiling through rain, holding a denial letter, and calling it a delay. Not this time. This time, the door would stay open. The air inside the federal hearing room in Washington, D.C. was cold, recycled, and heavy with expectation. Wood-paneled walls, flags perfectly pleated, and a row of nameplates along a long desk where senators and financial regulators sat with practiced poise. Cameras flanked both sides of the room, their red recording lights glowing like quiet beacons of scrutiny. This was not a place for emotion. It was a place where facts lived or were buried. Marcus Hill sat at the witness table, flanked by Kyla and Jeremiah. To his right was Elise Brooker, wearing a navy suit, her hair tied back, jaw clenched with the resolve of someone who decided not to be silent ever again. In front of Marcus was a microphone, a nameplate that simply read, Mr. Marcus D. Hill, founder, Hill Foundation, and a leather binder full of truth. The chair of the Senate Banking Oversight Committee, Senator Diane Garza of Illinois, tapped her gavel once. This hearing is called to order. Today we hear testimony regarding alleged discriminatory practices within financial institutions, particularly Norcrest Financial, and the broader implications for community access to banking. Her tone was neutral, but her eyes were focused. Marcus adjusted the mic. Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak not just for myself, but for every small business owner, single parent, retiree, and community leader who's ever walked into a bank only to be silently told, you don't belong here. He opened the binder, pulling out charts, highlighted memos, letters. This is not an isolated case. Norcrest is not unique. What we are confronting is a systemic flaw disguised as financial protocol. We are not imagining discrimination. We are enduring it. A few murmurs from the gallery. One senator leaned back, arms crossed. Marcus continued, I sat across from a teller who asked if the money in my hand was mine because of the color of my skin. But I didn't come here for my pride. I came because this country's economy cannot thrive if it continues to quietly deny opportunity based on heritage, zip code, or assumptions. Senator Garza nodded. Mr. Hill, we've reviewed your documents, but some would argue that banks must take necessary precautions in high fraud zones. What do you say to that? Marcus didn't blink. Fraud doesn't have a zip code. Bias does. A ripple passed through the room. Elise leaned into her microphone. The internal policies at Norcrest targeted Black and Latino communities disproportionately, regardless of individual creditworthiness. It wasn't about fraud. It was about fear, about keeping control. And another senator, older and stiff, cleared his throat. And how do you propose we fix this? New policies, Marcus replied. Transparency, oversight, public access to approval rate data by region and race, independent audits, and most of all, public consequence. Right now, banks can discriminate in the dark. That needs to change. He paused. And I'm not here asking for punishment. I'm asking for prevention. Later, as the hearing ended and cameras flashed, journalists rushed forward. Questions flew like darts. Mr. Hill, are you planning to sue Norcrest? Is this the start of a national campaign? Do you believe other banks are hiding similar practices? Marcus answered only what mattered. This is about systems, not scapegoats. We won't fix injustice by punishing one villain. We fix it by dismantling the silence that lets it grow. That evening, back in Atlanta, the town buzzed. Clips from the hearing flooded news outlets and social media. Memes appeared, quoting Marcus' line, fraud doesn't have a zip code. Bias does. It trended within hours, but not all the responses were applause. At 9:42 p.m., Kyla forwarded Marcus an anonymous email. Back off. You've made your point. We can make it hard for you to do business in this city. No name, no signature, just a warning laced with arrogance. Marcus read it twice, then closed his laptop. He wasn't afraid. The next morning, a letter arrived at the foundation, handwritten in clean cursive. No return address. Dear Mr. Hill, I watched your hearing. I'm 92 years old. I've had my savings frozen twice for asking too many questions at my local bank. I thought I'd die before someone said out loud what you said. Thank you. My grandchildren now know they're not alone. God bless you. MLJ. Marcus stared at the letter for a long moment, then placed it in the drawer beside his mother's loan rejection from 1985. He didn't speak for hours, but when he did, it was to Kyla. Tell the team, he said. We're not slowing down. I want 10 more town halls, a podcast series, a report called Banking While Black released every quarter. She nodded, already typing. And Kyla, he added, yes, I want us to buy a bank. She stopped mid-keystroke. A bank? She echoed. Yes, Marcus said. If they won't open the doors, we build new ones. He looked out the window at the Atlanta skyline. This fight started in silence, he said softly. Let's make sure it ends with a door open wide enough for all of us. 2 weeks after the Senate hearing, the Hill Foundation conference room became a war room. Maps lined the walls, districts, banking zones, community demographics. Marker strokes formed webs of potential partnerships and red flags. It was no longer a campaign of protest. It was a campaign of creation. Marcus stood at the head of the table, sleeves rolled up, voice clear. We're not just exposing the old system. We're going to replace part of it. A black-led community-first financial institution, accessible, transparent, and owned by the people it serves. He pointed to the first pin on the map, South Atlanta Pilot Branch, partnered with local credit unions, digital first, but with walk-in services. We start with microloans, education workshops, and reinvestment programs for small businesses. Kyla chimed in. I've already spoken with the city's Office of Economic Development. They're cautiously interested. We just need seed capital and a name. Call it Liberty South, Marcus said. Simple, proud, familiar. Rosa handed him a folder. This is your short list of angel investors, people who believe in the mission. Marcus scanned the names. Some he knew personally, some had once kept their distance from anything this loud. I want a stake open for public buy-in, he said. We'll cap private ownership. This isn't about control, it's about legacy. Later that night, Marcus met Jeremiah at their usual spot, a quiet diner tucked off Auburn Avenue. The waitress brought them coffee before they even ordered. They'd been coming there for years. Jeremiah stirred his sugar slowly. You really think a bank with your name on it won't be a target? It already is, Marcus replied. So, I may as well make it visible. Jeremiah shook his head, but his eyes were smiling. I never taught you to play small. You taught me to finish what we start. And this? Jeremiah asked, sipping. What does finishing look like to you? Marcus didn't answer right away. He stared out the window at the old bookstore across the street, shuttered for over a decade. Finishing? He finally said, looks like that place reopened. It looks like a mother walking into a bank and getting a loan without having to dress her dignity up in paperwork. It looks like a kid growing up thinking ownership isn't a dream, it's a path. Jeremiah nodded. Then finish loud, son. Finish loud. The next morning, the first billboard went up along I-75. A deep navy background, bold white text, coming soon. Liberty South, a bank for all of us. It sparked immediate buzz. Local media picked it up within hours. Interviews, op-eds, debates. The old guard dismissed it as a symbolic gesture, but the neighborhoods it aimed to serve saw it as something more. A flag on new ground. Donations poured in. So did stories. The Liberty South website submission form received over 4,000 personal banking testimonies in its first week. Some heartbreaking, some defiant, all echoing the same truth. We've waited long enough, but not everyone was clapping. 3 days later, Marcus received an email marked confidential. A source at Norcrest had leaked internal memos. Plans for a community rebranding initiative paired with aggressive PR targeting Liberty South as a risky startup without oversight. Kyla slammed her laptop shut when she saw it. They're trying to strangle you before you're born. Marcus remained calm. Then we grow faster than they can spin. He picked up the phone and called Congresswoman Renee Thomas, a longtime ally. Renee, it's Marcus. We need a public show of support. She didn't hesitate. When and where? Saturday. Edgewood. We're breaking ground. That Saturday, a crowd of over 2,000 gathered in the lot where Liberty South's first branch would rise. Choirs sang. Food trucks lined the block. Elders held signs that read, "My bank, my voice." College students waved Liberty flags. Jeremiah stood beside Marcus, tears in his eyes. Marcus stepped onto the makeshift stage, microphone in hand. I was told this was impossible, he said. That banking couldn't be fair. That equity doesn't belong behind bulletproof glass. He paused, looking across the sea of faces. They were wrong. Cheers erupted. We're not building a bank, he continued. We're building trust. We're building access. And we're building a future that doesn't ask permission to exist. The crowd roared, and as shovels hit soil and cameras flashed, Marcus felt it, not the satisfaction of victory, but the gravity of beginning. This wasn't a protest anymore. It was a promise. And Liberty South was just the first brick. The following Monday, while Liberty South's groundbreaking was still trending online, Marcus walked into the Hill Foundation to find Rosa already waiting by his office door, face tight. We have a problem, she said simply. He followed her inside. Kyla was there, too, standing by the projection screen. They dropped it last night, Kyla said, clicking her remote. On the wall appeared a slick commercial, warm piano music, smiling diverse families, bank tellers shaking hands across marble counters. The screen faded into the Norcrest logo, followed by a slogan in bright blue. Rebuilding trust, reimagining community. Marcus leaned back, arms crossed. Rebranding. They bought airtime in 5 major cities, Kyla added. And they've launched a grant program, $1 million in equity opportunity funds for underserved neighborhoods. Guess what zip codes they're targeting first? Marcus already knew. Ours. It's camouflage, Rosa said. They're trying to outgive us, outshine us. Pretend they're changing without changing. It's distraction, Marcus replied. They're giving just enough to slow the anger without fixing the rot. Kyla nodded. Problem is, it's working. Their stock just bumped 2.3%. Analysts are calling the move a bold pivot toward progress. Marcus stood silent, eyes scanning the screen. Then it's time we stop playing defense. He picked up his phone and called Elise Brooker. Elise, he said. How fast can we get your full testimony recorded and published? Give me 2 days, she said. I'll come into the studio myself. Marcus turned back to Kyla. Cut a documentary piece. Start it with Elise's story. Then weave in the town hall footage, the Senate hearing, the data. No actors, no music, just raw facts, real voices. We're going all in? Kyla asked. Marcus' voice was steady. No more quiet truths. 2 days later, the documentary aired online under the title The Invisible Ledger. Within 24 hours, it surpassed 1 million views. Elisa's voice shook as she read her email exchanges aloud, managers warning staff to limit risk exposure in minority areas. Memos suggesting silent flagging in one damning line: if we avoid the neighborhoods, we avoid the noise. The public reaction was swift and unforgiving. Protesters gathered outside Norcrest's headquarters. Hashtags calling for resignations went viral. More former employees came forward offering corroborating evidence. The Financial Conduct Bureau opened an inquiry. And still, Marcus didn't gloat. He called a press conference instead. In front of a crowded auditorium, he addressed the cameras. This was never about vengeance. It's about visibility, and justice must be seen to be believed. But behind the scenes, new threats emerged. One night, Kyla burst into his office. "Marcus, someone leaked your personal banking records, your real estate holdings, your donor list. Someone is trying to paint this as self-enrichment. They want to turn me into the villain," Marcus murmured. "We can fight it," she said. "But it's going to get ugly." He nodded. "Then let's stay clean. Everything we do, every dollar, every deal, transparent, public." Later, as he sat in his study, Marcus opened the leaked spreadsheet on his own. He wasn't afraid of his wealth. He was afraid of what it would be twisted into. He stared at the numbers, the columns, the properties. Then he opened another tab and began writing a new section for Liberty South's website, Our Founder's Finances. Full disclosure. He uploaded it himself. No defense, no denial, just facts. Because leadership, he believed, wasn't about being perfect. It was about being honest. The next morning, he received a handwritten note delivered by courier. The handwriting was sharp and slanted. "You're costing us billions. Walk away while you still have control. The next wave won't be polite." No name, no signature, just threat dressed as warning. He placed the letter next to the one from the 92-year-old woman. Then he wrote something on the back of it. Control is not the goal. Change is. The next few weeks brought a different rhythm, faster, louder, more dangerous. Marcus began receiving security escorts. Liberty South's launch team received cyber attacks. Smear blogs emerged, hinting at ulterior motives and hidden backers. But every time one lie surfaced, truth followed louder. Marcus spoke at schools, in churches, at union halls. Everywhere he went, people came not for him, but for what he represented: possibility, dignity, access. He ended every speech with the same line: "We aren't asking for a seat at the table. We're building a new one." And Liberty South's waitlist kept growing. The bank hadn't even opened yet. But the movement had, and no commercial could compete with that. It happened at 3:17 a.m. A soft ping woke Marcus from his sleep. His phone lighting up with a system alert from Liberty South's IT department. At first, he thought it was another failed login attempt, the kind that had become common lately. But then a second ping followed, then a third, then a call. He picked up immediately. "Marcus, it's Dev," said the voice on the line, panicked. "We've got a full-scale breach. They're hitting the servers hard. Real-time denial of service attack. But it's not just that. Someone's trying to corrupt the loan application database." Marcus swung out of bed, barefoot on the cold hardwood floor. "How much damage?" "We caught it early, but they're good. It's surgical." They were inside before the firewall even flagged them. Marcus was already halfway into a hoodie. "Shut down the servers, switch to offline backup protocol, and alert Kyla." We did," Dev replied. "And there's something else. They cloned the public-facing site. A mirror domain is spreading false information. They're posting that Liberty South is a scam." Marcus froze. He opened his browser, typed in what should have been their homepage. A fake replica appeared. Same colors, same logo, but the message was different. "Warning: Liberty South under federal investigation for fraud. Protect your funds. Report suspicious activity now." A red banner flashed across the top. It looked legitimate. By sunrise, the fake site had been shared 40,000 times. News anchors speculated on its validity. Commentators on social media split into sides. Marcus and his team scrambled to post clarifications, release statements, and report the mirror site for takedown. It was a coordinated attack, fast, strategic, professional. "This isn't some angry blogger," Kyla said at the emergency staff meeting that morning. "This is funded sabotage." Jeremiah arrived not long after, eyes stormy. "They want fear," he said. That's always been the weapon. Make people afraid to trust, afraid to hope. Marcus stood at the head of the table. Then we answer fear with facts. He turned to Rosa. Pull every application, audit each one, release anonymized statistics showing approval rates, diversity of applicants, and total funds moved. Then to Kyla, we go live tonight. No scripts, just me and the truth. By 8 p.m., a live stream appeared on every Liberty South channel. Marcus sat at a plain wooden desk. No filters, no edits. This morning, someone tried to tell you Liberty South is a lie, he began. They cloned our voice, twisted our words, and hoped you wouldn't notice. He leaned forward. But you know what's real? The letters we've received, the tears we've seen, the decades of doors that were quietly closed to good people who wanted nothing more than a chance. He held up a folder. These are real applications, real stories, and this. He tapped his chest. This is a real fight. The feed went viral. But more than that, it resonated. The next day, national news picked up the story. Cybersecurity firms began investigating the breach. Anonymous sources pointed to third-party contractors tied to Norcrest's PR affiliates. The same week, Norcrest's CEO was called to testify before the Senate Banking Committee. He denied all involvement, but the pressure mounted. Then something unexpected happened. A group of employees from Norcrest's Atlanta Total publicly resigned. They released a joint statement. We can no longer be part of a system that chooses silence over change. We stand with Liberty South. Marcus read their words twice. He called them personally. One by one. Thank you, he said each time, not just for leaving, but for standing. Their departure sparked more. 2 more banks in the region began internal investigations. A watchdog group demanded access to Norcrest's internal audits. Still, Liberty South faced headwinds. Donations slowed. Calls poured in, concerned clients asking if their applications were safe. They're testing our faith, Rosa said one afternoon. Not just our systems. Marcus knew she was right. That week, he walked through the half-finished lobby of Liberty South's first branch. Drywall dust clung to the air. Electricians wired lights into the ceiling. It wasn't a bank yet, but it was becoming. He stood in the middle of the room and closed his eyes. He heard his mother's voice, quiet, proud. You build what we weren't allowed to ask for, and he would. He called a new meeting. We're going ahead with launch, Marcus announced. No delay, no apology. Opening day will be next month. We'll invite the press, but more importantly, we'll invite the people. Kyla looked at him. Even with the threats, especially with the threats. Because the battle wasn't just for access. It was for belief. And they would not lose that. Not now. Not ever. The 10th of June dawned hot and clear over Atlanta with a summer sun that burned through the haze by 7 a.m. The streets near Edgewood buzzed before the city's usual rhythm could begin. A line stretched 3 blocks from the corner of Liberty South's new headquarters. Elderly couples in Sunday clothes, young professionals with laptops under their arms, families with strollers stood waiting. Some had come hours early. Some had waited their whole lives. At 9 a.m. sharp, the doors opened. Marcus stood just inside the entrance. Dressed not in a suit, but in a short-sleeved dress shirt, slacks, and a lapel pin shaped like a torch. He shook the hand of the first customer, a retired schoolteacher named Mrs. Linda Dalton, walked her to the first service desk himself. I never thought I'd see this, she whispered, glancing around the bright open lobby. Marcus smiled. Now you'll help others see it, too. Kyla and Rosa worked from upstairs managing press, logistics, and security. The media presence was thick. Camera crews lined the sidewalk, snapping photos of the unthinkable. A bank opening in a predominantly black neighborhood led by black ownership and greeted not with protest, but celebration. By noon, every teller station was active. Over 700 new accounts had been opened, some for savings, others for business plans written in the margins of old notebooks. One man walked in carrying nothing but a folded envelope and walked out with the first financial backing for his food truck. But not everything that day glowed. At 1:17 p.m., a small group of protesters appeared across the street. 5 men in tailored suits held signs that read, "Liberty South equals woke scam" and "Keep banking professional." They shouted into bullhorns, accusing Marcus of stirring division, of politicizing finance, of creating a segregated system. Inside, the staff tensed. Kyla's phone buzzed nonstop with alerts from online forums tracking extremist chatter. Jeremiah, who'd arrived earlier to show support, turned to Marcus. "They want a reaction," he said. "And we'll give them one," Marcus replied calmly. Dignified, clear, unshakable, he stepped outside with no microphone, no podium, just himself. The protesters quieted, surprised by his presence. Marcus walked to the edge of the sidewalk and raised his voice enough to carry. "We didn't build this bank to divide," he said. "We built it because too many doors were closed too long. If your bank had served us equally, this one wouldn't have been necessary." He paused. "But we're not here to replace anyone. We're here to remind you financial dignity is not a handout. It's a human right." One of the men scoffed. "You're turning banking into a charity project." "No," Marcus said, stepping closer. "We're turning it into what it should have been all along, fair." He turned and walked back inside. The protesters eventually dispersed, drowned out by the ongoing wave of customers. That evening, as the last account was logged and the doors finally closed, the staff gathered in the conference room. They were exhausted, elated, quietly stunned. Marcus stood at the front. "Today was about more than numbers," he said. "We showed a generation of children that wealth doesn't have to be inherited to be built. That trust can start at our doorstep." He paused, his voice catching slightly. "I don't know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what fight will come next, but today we opened a bank and nobody can take that from us." Jeremiah clapped first. Then the room erupted in cheers. Later, long after the staff had left and the streets outside had gone quiet, Marcus walked the halls of Liberty South alone. He touched the counter where the first deposit had been made, looked through the glass at the city his mother once believed had no room for her dreams. He stepped into his office, turned on the desk lamp, and opened a notebook. On the first page, he wrote, "We didn't knock to be let in. We built the door. We built the key, and we opened it wide." As he closed the notebook, his phone buzzed once more. A new message from Rosa. Subject line, FBI contact. Marcus opened it, eyes narrowing as he read the brief message. "Agents from the Bureau want to speak about Norcrest's internal leaks. The investigation may go federal." He leaned back, breath slow. The war wasn't over. But today had been a victory, and tomorrow the truth would march forward once more. The hearing room was quieter this time. No flashbulbs, no grand introductions, just the low hum of ceiling lights and the scratch of pens over notepads. Federal agents lined one wall, hands clasped. Norcrest's former CEO sat at the table, his jaw clenched, a lawyer murmuring beside him. Across from him, Marcus sat again. Same calm eyes, same composed breath. But this time, he wasn't alone. Behind him sat a row of former employees, Stella, Elise, and the 9 who had resigned in protest. They weren't here to accuse. They were here to witness, to confirm that the rot hadn't been imagined. It had been embedded. An agent from the Department of Justice clicked a remote. Screens lit up with timelines, email threads, and internal memos, some dating back 15 years. Words that had once been whispered behind closed doors were now visible in full fluorescent light. Avoid high-risk zones unless media optics require presence. Pre-flag applicants from ZIPs with 70% minority populations. Client optics, diversity, and ad campaigns. 2 are actual branch staffing. One of the agents looked to Marcus. "Mr. Hill, do you believe this policy was intentional discrimination or unconscious bias?" Marcus didn't hesitate. "Intentional. It takes coordination to be this consistent." The former CEO finally spoke. "These practices were never approved at the executive level. Any irregularities must have been the result of rogue middle management. Marcus looked at him directly. So many middle managers went rogue. They all followed the same pattern. That's not rogue. That's routine. Silence followed. By week's end, the investigation was escalated. Norcrest's board of directors issued an apology. Generic, unconvincing shareholder lawsuits began. The bank's market value dropped by 18% in 1 week. But Marcus didn't celebrate. He went home, changed into jeans and a faded Tuskegee University hoodie, and walked through the Grove Park neighborhood. A little boy ran past him holding a flyer for Liberty South's youth finance class. His father waved from a stoop. "You, Marcus?" he asked. "I am?" The man stood, walked over, and extended a hand. "My boy's got a savings account now with his name on it. He checks it every morning. Thinks he's a millionaire." Marcus chuckled. "One day he might be." "Nah," the man said. "Not might, will. Because now he believes it's possible." Later that night, Marcus sat on the floor of his study, a box of old letters beside him. One in particular caught his eye. His mother's final letter before she passed. He unfolded it carefully. "Baby, I always hoped you'd be the kind of man who didn't just fix things for himself, but for others, too. It's the work that outlives us. Make it count." He read the line 3 times, then stood up. The next morning, Liberty South announced its second branch, this time in Birmingham, then a third in Raleigh. Each new location opened with a community event, free workshops, and one rule above all. The doors stay open no matter the storm. Marcus gave fewer interviews now. He turned down a book deal, declined a TED Talk. Instead, he taught 1 night a week at his old high school, Finance 101. No cameras, no applause, just a chalkboard, a group of wide-eyed kids, and a man who understood that real change didn't come from speeches. It came from presence. One evening, as class let out, a girl with a green spiral notebook approached him. "Mr. Hill," she said, "my grandma told me about you." She said, "You made the bank stop lying." He smiled. "I just helped people see what was already true." She looked up. "I'm going to open a bank one day, too." He knelt to her height. "Then make sure you remember who it's for." That night, Marcus returned home, turned off his phone, and sat outside on the porch. The sky above Atlanta was clear, stars blinking above the city that had once shut its doors to his mother. He held a glass of iced tea, listened to the faint sound of traffic in the distance, and let himself feel it, not victory, not pride, just peace, and the quiet promise that no door once opened would ever be closed again, brought to you by BUP Stories.